Man discovers his 3 sons are not his biological children and understands what his wife has done. It had to be the doctor's fault. He just broke some heartbreaking news. But it couldn't be true, could it? Despite his unwavering devotion to his sons, he was forced to accept that they weren't really his. Unfortunately, this guy would find out very quickly that his life had been a sham. He had to make a decision on what to do about it, though, after learning the facts. The response? Make her pay for it. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. 55-year-old British businessman and entrepreneur Richard Mason was a resident of the United Kingdom. He has successfully co-founded the British pricing comparison website MoneySupermarket.com. Richard had been married to Kate at the time. In the 1980s, the two were employed by banks when they first crossed paths. They had 3 sons together as a couple, or so Richard believed. They had 3 sons, the 19-year-old twins Ed and Joel, and 23-year-old Will. Richard and Kate's marriage was in serious trouble and was disintegrating in 2007. The couple ultimately made the decision to split in 2008. Regarding his marriage, Richard had no regrets. Even after the marriage split up, he continued to provide for and show love to his 3 sons. Kate received a $5 million lump sum as part of the financial settlement, and all 3 boys' private school tuition would be paid for. Still, Richard said, Kate harassed him and attempted to get him to pay more for years. The only positive outcome of the chilly and unhappy marriage, in Richard's opinion, was his 3 boys. Though he was unaware of it at the moment, there was a surprise in store. It was in 2016 when Richard uncovered the reality about his old life, after they had been divorced for almost 10 years. He got up one day and dressed for his usual visit to the doctor. But Richard's life was about to take a drastic turn because of that appointment. He had no idea he would be leaving the doctor's office in a rage when he stepped in. Richard had gone for a typical checkup, but it would not be quite so routine after all. Richard's world completely changed as a result of the tests the doctor conducted. When Richard's doctor revealed that he had cystic fibrosis, everything changed. However, things didn't stop there. The illness, cystic fibrosis, causes frequent lung infections. Over time, this damages the lungs and lowers their capacity. Breathing gets harder and harder over time. Regretfully, cystic fibrosis is an inherited illness. The illness had claimed the life of Richard's own sister a few years prior. Richard was terrified that he might have given this to his 3 sons in addition to being upset. Fortunately, the doctor told him that there was no way he could have passed this condition on to them. Richard was elated beyond measure. Unfortunately, this relief was fleeting, as the doctor was not yet done speaking. Then the doctor revealed some startling news. He was unable to spread the illness to others for a very specific reason. Richard's entire life fell apart at that instant. As the topic of fertility came up, the doctor replied, "Look, yourself and Emma, you know you're going to have difficulty having children because you, as a man with cystic fibrosis, are infertile. You do realize that was not possible?" Richard noticed a glimmer of hope. Is it possible that this was a medical miracle? Could it be because the physician misdiagnosed him? Richard boastfully remarked, "Well, you must have the diagnosis wrong because I've already got 3 boys." I actually felt pleased to be able to tell him this because, in my mind, it proved his diagnosis was wrong, he says. However, the doctor only shook his head sadly, looking uncomfortable and taken aback. Richard realized that he had been clinging to thin air. Richard slowly came to realize this. Then the truth slammed home like a sledgehammer. He relived his life with Kate, examining each moment with new insight. In retrospect, he recalled instances where certain warning signs ought to have raised red flags. Then he started to feel ill. This is not possible to be taking place. Was there a scandal occurring within his own building? Richard had been too blind to see if there had been. He did work late most nights, after all. When Kate called him late one night from a London hotel to let him know that her flight had been delayed, he hadn't even batted an eyelash. Richard gave a disgusted grunt. She had stated that it was a work trip. However, other information was coming to light that he had not given any thought to before. After the birth of his twins, remarks started to come in. But suddenly, as he thought back to the routine, carefree croons of, "Oh look, they have your eyes," Kate's remarks started to take on a more sinister meaning. Richard had not given it much attention at the moment, but there was another warning sign. Kate started showing interest in something she had never discussed in their 7 years of marriage, right after she learned she was expecting their first kid. Being pregnant for the first time thrilled Kate. She attended birthing classes and studied every pregnancy book available. But when she suddenly showed an interest in Judaism, Richard was astonished. Both Kate and he had grown up as Christians. Kate refused to have her 3 children baptized and even went so far as to give them Jewish middle names. A rabbi had also been consulted by her. Perhaps this revealed something about the double life she had been living, or perhaps the hint led directly to the man she had been seeing. Though they didn't look like him at all, Richard was aware that his boys did. Richard was beginning to believe that he knew who his wife had been meeting as the clues continued to mount. Maybe he was getting ahead of himself, though. He was compelled to think about something else. Would Kate, though, admit it? Or had all of this been a dreadful mistake? Richard digested the information, running it through his head. He could only rely on 3 hints. First, there was the likelihood that his ex-wife had been seeing him when she was away on business travels. The other was that his kids looked like a man he had previously met, Kate's business partner. That would make sense. Lastly, and perhaps most illogically, the man was Jewish. However, twins are not common. Identical twin pregnancies happen 0.45% of the time in the general population, or 1 in every 250 births. It is also common knowledge that the chance of conceiving twins is increased when fertility medications are used. Had Kate known before he had that they were experiencing infertility issues? After all, when Kate eventually became pregnant, they had been married for 7 years. But for a single day, that was enough conjecture. Now was the moment to face her. He frantically typed a note to Kate demanding an explanation. "Hi, I went to the Liverpool Chest Hospital today to finally receive my diagnosis that I have cystic fibrosis. They have never known of a male with cystic fibrosis who has fathered a kid, much less 3. I am 98% positive that I am not a father," he continued. Kate was not responding, even though she had read the message. Richard felt it was time to adopt a more forceful strategy after realizing that remaining polite wouldn't get him anywhere. "I was hoping that you could relieve me of the further indignity of more tests by letting me know now if I am the father," Richard wrote. "I am happy to go along with your advice as to how best to tell the boys, but if you force me to go through these extra tests, then I shall be telling them as I wish." Captured, Kate responded in a matter of minutes this time. "Of course the boys are yours, no matter what the science might suggest," she stated. Richard was incredulous. She simply denied everything. "All right," he concluded. He could play hardball with Kate if she wanted to. He disclosed everything to his eldest son, who was a university student at the time. However, how did he react to the news? "I told him I'd just been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, which he took surprisingly calmly," Richard recalled. "Yeah, but one of the things I recently learned is that it is highly unusual for a person with cystic fibrosis to become a father." "I'm already ahead of you, Dad," he remarked. "You're implying that you're not my father." Richard, distraught at the prospect that he wasn't his son's biological father, recalls that it would have been the toughest statement to speak, and he did it for him. Then Richard admitted to his oldest son that although he was still his father, he didn't believe he had fathered him. Richard remarked, "I was very angry, but it was also very emotional." That day, he had been given 2 blows. Thus, what action was he going to take? Richard thinks that your identity is defined by your children. Not only had he been given a frightening medical diagnosis, but he also discovered that he was childless. It was nearly unbearable for him to consider that his legacy would end with him. Then, he heard from Kate at last, 2 days later. As it happens, Kate's oldest son had approached her. She confessed over the phone to Richard. She acknowledged that during their 20 years of marriage, she had been seeing another man. To exacerbate the situation, Richard had only casually encountered him. The man worked at Barclays Bank. She would be traveling as a union representative, and the man would meet her at a hotel in London. She persisted, however, that Richard was the father of their children. He was forced to seek the advice of a specialist. He was aware that the previous 2 decades had been a total fabrication. He intended to hold her accountable. Richard made the decision to see paternity fraud specialist Roger Terrell. It was determined after a battery of testing that Richard was, in fact, not able to father children. Getting samples of his son's DNA was the next step. The twins were clearly not his, according to the findings of the DNA test. But to make things even more difficult, his oldest son declined to give a sample. "As far as I'm concerned, he's my dad, and that's that," declared Richard's oldest son. However, Richard still possessed all the evidence required to file a lawsuit against Kate. He started court proceedings at Birmingham County Court in December of 2016. Richard's eldest son, however, kept his word and had another message for the man he considered to be his father. Naturally, Richard was really hurt by this. The lies Kate told had a huge knock-on effect. However, as the case developed, the twins' response was significantly different. Despite being aware that Richard is not their real father, the twins continue to look up to him as their father. As a sign of solidarity, one of the twins even sent Richard a very long message. The note said, "Dad, no matter what, you would always be Dad to me, as I explained from the beginning. Naturally, I'll keep in contact. That won't ever alter. You're always welcome here as well. And you'll always be my dad. Love, Ux." Richard won his case in court when Kate's ludicrous lies came to light, and she was forced to give Richard more than $300,000 in compensation. Kate consented to the settlement, but only under the strict requirement that the man who was her son's biological father be anonymous. Richard, however, feels that it was a hollow victory, and he also has a message for the boy's biological father. After reading this piece, Richard said he hoped the biological father would come forward. "Even though, ideally, they would always think of me as their father," he said, "I think the boys have a right to know who their father is, not least for their own sake." Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.